the show is doing something right. Very right. I mean, this was just a simple, wacky episode, yet the amount of notes I have on it is insane. Meanwhile, something like True Detective, I can just come up with like a brief bit of notes. Is the air conditioner on? So yeah, this is Dungeons, Dungeons, and more Dungeons. And basically, this episode is Dipper gets a a game that's clearly parodying Dungeons and Dragons, and he wants Mabel to play them, but of course Mabel thinks it's geeky and doesn't want to play. Stan doesn't want to play. Seuss doesn't want to play. He wants to play his own geeky thing, which was an amusing side gag. And but Grunkle Stan also likes playing the game, so he agrees to play with Dipper. And the two play, but not Stan, but Ford found this magical die while he was in the portal, and it basically can do a bunch of random things. And unfortunately for Ford, Stan gets really mad at Ford because they want to watch the season finale of Duck Detective, which has been an amusing running gag throughout the show. And he gets mad, throws the die on the ground, and accidentally lands on the wizard. And this evil wizard, who I'm pretty sure is voiced by Weird Al Yankovic, I could be wrong. The IMDb information isn't up yet, and I didn't DVR it, so I can't look back on the credits movie. He comes to life, captures Dipper and Ford, and they're forced to play in a dungeons and not forced to play. Their brains are gonna be harvested, but Stan and Mabel show up to rescue them, and they basically have to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and they win. And this episode was really surprising for a couple of reasons. I think the first thing is just how easily it was able to just drift back into the crazy wackiness that the show is used to, which is surprising because we've had 2 episodes of really intense stuff. And so to just go back into a wacky, silly episode, like I think the last time we had a wacky, silly episode on Gravity Falls was The Love God. I mean, Northwest Mystery Noir was kind of an oddball episode just because we I don't even think Stan and Seuss appeared in that episode, if I remember. So this is our first time back with the gang in a while, and it was able to sort of give fans everything. It was sort of give them the wacky silliness we've known for a while, also developing the characters and moving the story forward. And again, we got our fair amount, and people who enjoyed the show for the heartfelt stuff got their heartfelt stuff. The people who enjoyed for the silliness, like it was one of those. There was something for everyone. Like the kids could get into the relation, just the gags. You could enjoy it for the heartfelt silliness, or you could enjoy it for the gags. Yeah, I'm sounding like Brooke Word. Maybe. But Gravity Falls, this week they did something that Gravity Falls consistently does really well, which is they'll take a familiar story, which in this case is these characters learn to appreciate this element of a character's life, and they made it feel fresh. And the reason why it felt fresh was because, again, the characters in this show are so fully realized that you want to see it happen to this character. And they'll also do something interesting, which in this case was satire. They made fun of Dungeons and Dragons. They made fun of the 90s. And they made fun of, and they mocked the show itself and its viewers. But we'll get into that in a bit. So first I'm going to start off with the heartfelt stuff, the emotional core, since I think that's one thing Gravity Falls is really good at that some kids shows just really miss. So obviously the next few episodes we're obviously going to deal with Stanford getting assimilated with the group and bonding with the characters. And sorry if I'm blanking out. Bonding with the characters. And it kind of reminds me of Book 3 of Avatar, where it seems like we're just going to be spending each episode with the character getting a little bit more acclimated into the group. And I always thought, and I think Dipper is a good place to start for a few reasons. I mean, these are both characters who are obsessed with the strange and unknown and are very nerdy. So it seems very natural that they be the first to bond. And I feel like obviously Mabel's going to bond with him quickly next, since Mabel's this weird, quirky girl, and Stan's also kind of weird and the oddball. And I feel like Ford's going to take like the longest bit of time. And which is another thing I liked, how, Ford and Stan are still at odds. There's this sort of respect they have for each other, but they aren't quite there yet. And I feel like if the show's smart, it'll sort of work towards that. So yeah, but I like how it used the relationship between Ford and Dipper, because it wasn't just having them bond for the sake of gags, having them bond for the sake of moving the plot forward. It also kind of spoke to some of the viewers of the show, and because there are a lot of nerds out there, a lot of kids who are outcast, who think and act differently than most other people. And this show, consistent, especially with Mabel, but so here has been constantly saying it's okay to be weird, enjoy being yourself. Like, it celebrates that nerdiness. And this episode kind of speaks to it. And I'm not sure how many of you watch Doug Walker and Rob Walker's vlogs, because they also love the show, and check them out if you haven't. But anyway, Robert Walker posted an article a few weeks back, which I'm going to post, like, not even a few weeks, like a week ago. And I'm going to put it in the description below because it's a really interesting article. And it's all these newspaper clippings from the 80s where they talked about how Dungeons and Dragons was witchcraft, it was bad for you. And there was a time when this game was, like, frowned upon. And now here's this episode that completely celebrates that concept and encourages it. And I can honestly relate to that. I mean, every week I go over to a friend's house and play this Dungeons and Dragons-ish game with him and a few other friends. At college, I'll occasionally, when I have time, because I have such a busy schedule, but when I have time, I play this Dungeons and Dragons-ish game with a few friends of mine, and it's so much fun. And what's great about this is that it was able to both celebrate and mock Dungeons and Dragons, but when it mocked it, it didn't mock it in a way that was condescending, like pointing out how silly it was. Like, it was to a point where even as a fan of it, you could laugh at it. Like, it both celebrated and satirized it. Like, there were a lot of fun gags, like making fun of how long the game takes to set up and the amount of instructions, which, yeah, that made me laugh, because, yeah, it's so true. That is how Dungeons and Dragons works. Or, like, when you have to fight the one enemy, it's like, how'd you defeat my one minion? It's like, yeah, that's how Dungeons and Dragons